There is a reason certain shapes feel alive when you look at them. A reason why a spiral carved into stone can feel more meaningful than words, and why ancient temples were designed around patterns rather than decorations. Long before mathematics became a tool for measurement, it was a language. One used to describe the invisible architecture of reality itself. What if the universe does not run on chaos but on design, across continents and civilizations that never met? The same symbols emerged again and again, circles within circles, interlocking triangles, perfect ratios hidden in stone, art, and sacred sites. These were not artistic coincidences, nor were they primitive attempts at science. They were instructions, maps, keys, and what they unlocked was never meant to be obvious. Sacred geometry is often presented today as something decorative or symbolic, a pretty pattern printed on yoga mats or etched into jewelry. But this is a diluted echo of something far older and far more powerful. To the ancients, these shapes were not representations of reality. They were reality frozen into form. Geometry was not studied, it was remembered. Hidden within these forms is a worldview that sees consciousness, matter, sound, and space as expressions of the same underlying order. A belief that creation follows precise laws, and that by understanding those laws, one could align with forces far greater than the individual mind. This is why these patterns appear in places of initiation, healing, and transformation. They were never passive symbols, they were tools. Yet over time, this knowledge fractured, reduced to diagrams without context, separated from ritual, experience, and direct transmission. What once functioned as a bridge between human awareness and cosmic intelligence became abstract geometry, safe, measurable, and stripped of its original power. In this video, we will go beyond the surface patterns. We will explore where sacred geometry truly comes from, why it was guarded so carefully, and what these shapes were designed to activate within those who understood them. We will uncover why the same forms appear in galaxies, flowers, temples, and the human body, and why ancient civilizations believed this was no accident. Because sacred geometry was never meant to be admired. It was meant to be entered. To understand sacred geometry, we must step into a time when knowledge was not written for the masses, but transmitted through symbols, rituals, and lived experience. In the ancient world, wisdom was not something you accumulated, it was something you were initiated into. And geometry stood at the center of that initiation. In ancient Egypt, geometry was considered divine law. The priests did not see shapes as abstractions, but as expressions of Ma'at, the cosmic order that governed stars, seasons, life, and death. Temples were aligned not only to the cardinal directions, but to stellar events, ratios, and harmonic proportions. The geometry embedded into pyramids and sacred chambers was believed to stabilize consciousness itself, allowing the initiate to resonate with higher realms of awareness. The Greeks inherited this understanding, though much of it was deliberately veiled. Pythagoras, often remembered today as a mathematician, was in truth the leader of a mystery school. To his followers, numbers were not quantities, they were principles. 1 was unity, 2 was polarity, 3 was harmony. Geometry was sacred because it revealed how the one becomes the many. To study it was to study creation unfolding from source into form. This belief was not isolated. In India, the construction of mandalas and yantras followed strict geometric laws meant to mirror the structure of the cosmos. These were not visual aids for meditation, they were interfaces. Entered correctly, they guided consciousness inward and outward simultaneously, collapsing the boundary between observer and observed. In ancient China, similar principles governed architecture, medicine, and cosmology, all rooted in balance, proportion, and resonance. What ties these civilizations together is not coincidence, but a shared philosophical understanding that reality is ordered, intelligent, and mathematically precise at its deepest level. Sacred geometry was the language used to describe that precision without reducing it to mere calculation. It allowed the infinite to be represented without being diminished. So why did this knowledge fade? Because sacred geometry threatened hierarchy. It taught that the universe is accessible, not controlled. That truth is not owned by kings, priests, or institutions, but discovered through alignment. Over time, geometry was separated from spirituality and handed to engineers, while metaphysics was left abstract and symbolic. The bridge between the two collapsed. What survived were fragments, beautiful shapes without instruction manuals, symbols without initiations. Modern eyes see patterns. Ancient minds saw processes. They understood that geometry was not meant to be memorized, but experienced. And this is where the true mystery begins, because once you realize sacred geometry was never just about understanding the universe, you begin to ask what it was meant to awaken within the human being. At the foundation of sacred geometry is a simple but unsettling idea. Reality is structured, and that structure is geometric. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Before there is matter, before there is motion, there is pattern. And the earliest of these patterns are not complex, they are deceptively simple. The most fundamental of all is the point. In ancient teachings, the point represents the source, pure potential, unmanifested and infinite. It has no size, no direction, no boundary. Yet from this apparent nothingness, everything emerges. When the point extends itself, it becomes a line. With movement, direction is born. With direction, time quietly enters the equation. When a line rotates around its origin, it creates a circle, the first complete form. To ancient civilizations, the circle was sacred because it had no beginning and no end. It symbolized unity, eternity, and the wholeness of existence. This is why circles dominate sacred architecture, ritual spaces, and cosmological diagrams across cultures. The circle was not worshipped, it was recognized. Now imagine two circles overlapping. Where they intersect, a new shape emerges, a lens-like form known to ancient initiates as the doorway. This overlapping was not seen as decoration. It represented relationship, duality, the moment the one becomes aware of itself through reflection. From this interaction, complexity begins to unfold. This simple act, circles intersecting, forms the foundation of one of the most important geometric structures ever known, the flower of life. Far from being a mystical ornament, this pattern was understood as a blueprint of creation itself. Each circle is born from the center of another, expanding outward in perfect symmetry. To the ancients, this was not art. It was a diagram of how reality replicates itself. But here is the part that is often overlooked. Sacred geometry was never meant to be studied passively. These forms were designed to be contemplated, traced, visualized, and even walked. Temples encoded these patterns into floors and ceilings so that the initiate's body would move through geometry, not just observe it. Geometry was a spatial experience. Why does this matter? Because the human nervous system responds to proportion and symmetry at a level deeper than conscious thought. Certain ratios, especially those found repeatedly in nature, create coherence in perception. They calm the mind, focus attention, and subtly reorganize awareness. The ancients understood this long before neuroscience had a name. Sacred geometry then was a technology of alignment. By engaging with these forms, one was not learning about the universe. One was tuning themselves to it. And this leads to a more provocative question. If simple shapes can alter perception, what happens when geometry becomes more complex? When patterns begin to encode not just structure, but movement, vibration, and transformation. This is where sacred geometry stops being a theory and becomes a map of consciousness itself. As geometry evolves beyond simple forms, it begins to reveal something far more unsettling: motion without movement and change without time. The ancients were not only interested in what shapes looked like, but in what they did when contemplated deeply. At advanced levels, sacred geometry was understood as a dynamic system, not a static one. One of the most guarded insights was this: complex geometric forms encode vibration. When certain shapes are layered, rotated, or nested within one another, they imply movement. Not physical movement, but oscillation, patterns repeating, folding, and unfolding. To ancient initiates, this was the missing link between matter and spirit. Geometry was how vibration became visible. This is why many sacred symbols appear paradoxical. They look still yet feel active, balanced yet alive. The ancients believed these forms mirrored how consciousness itself behaves, expanding, contracting, looping back on itself. Awareness was not linear. It spiraled, and the spiral, found everywhere from galaxies to shells, became one of the most important sacred forms for this reason. But here is where modern interpretations often go wrong. Sacred geometry is frequently treated as symbolic language, as if the shapes merely represent ideas. In ancient teachings, the relationship was reversed. The idea emerged from the shape. Geometry was primary, meaning was secondary. This distinction matters because it changes how these forms were used. They were not reminders of truths you already knew. They were mechanisms that revealed truths you could not access otherwise. Some traditions even warned against engaging with advanced geometric forms too early. Not because they were dangerous in a physical sense, but because they could destabilize perception. When the mind encounters patterns that contradict its habitual understanding of space and order, it is forced to reorganize itself. This reorganization was known as initiation. This also explains why sacred geometry became fragmented over time. Once removed from discipline training, ritual context, and ethical grounding, the forms lost their intended function. What remained were aesthetic remnants, beautiful, intriguing, but incomplete. Without guidance, geometry became decoration. Without initiation, it became mysticism without method. And yet, traces of the original understanding persist. Modern physics quietly echoes ancient insights when it describes reality as fields, frequencies, and relational structures rather than solid objects. Biology reveals geometric order and cellular growth. Even consciousness studies hint that perception itself is patterned, structured, and recursive. The ancients would not have found this surprising. To them, sacred geometry was the meeting point where mind and cosmos reflected one another. To study it deeply was to realize that the same patterns shaping galaxies also shape thought, emotion, and identity. The micro and the macro were not linked metaphorically. They were constructed from the same design principles. And once this realization takes hold, a deeper question arises. If geometry structures reality and reality structures consciousness, then learning to work with these forms is not about understanding the universe. It is about learning how to participate in it. Sacred geometry was never meant to remain theoretical. Its true purpose was always experiential, to be lived, applied, and embodied. The ancients understood that insight without practice fades quickly, while direct interaction with form leaves a lasting imprint on awareness. The question then is not whether sacred geometry works, but how it is approached. The first and most accessible practice is geometric contemplation. This is not visualization in the modern sense, nor passive observation. Choose a single form, a circle, a triangle, or a symmetrical pattern, and spend time with it daily. Sit comfortably, allow your breathing to slow, and gently rest your attention on the shape. Do not analyze it. Let the form impress itself upon your perception. Over time, many experience subtle shifts, a quieting of mental noise, heightened clarity, or a sense of internal alignment. These effects are not imagined. They arise because the mind naturally seeks coherence, and geometry provides it. A second practice involves spatial alignment. Ancient structures were designed so the body itself became part of the geometric experience. You can recreate this on a smaller scale. Arrange your living or meditation space with symmetry in mind. Balanced placement. Clear lines and intentional spacing influence how awareness moves through an environment. Disorder fragments attention. Proportion gathers it. This is why sacred spaces feel different before a single word is spoken. For those drawn to deeper work, movement through form becomes essential. Slow, deliberate walking in circular or spiral paths was used in initiation rites across cultures. The body memorizes patterns the intellect cannot. Even simple movements, tracing geometric shapes with the hands, following symmetrical breathing rhythms, or pacing measured steps, can reintroduce the lost relationship between geometry and embodiment. However, there are common pitfalls. Many approach sacred geometry seeking instant transformation. This was never its function. Geometry works gradually, restructuring perception layer by layer. Others collect symbols without discipline, mistaking accumulation for understanding. In ancient traditions, one form was studied for years before moving to the next. Depth mattered more than variety. The most important guidance is this. Sacred geometry responds to attention, not belief, not force. The shapes do not impose change. They invite alignment. Resistance creates distortion. Patience allows resonance. When practiced correctly, these techniques do not separate you from daily life. They sharpen it. Decision-making becomes clearer. Emotional responses soften. Patterns, both internal and external, become easier to recognize. You begin to sense order where there once seemed only randomness. This is the quiet power sacred geometry was always meant to offer. Not escape from the world, but deeper participation within it. Sacred geometry, when stripped of decoration and abstraction, reveals itself as something far more intimate than ancient symbolism. It is not a belief system, a religion, or a forgotten art form. It is a reminder, quiet but precise, that reality follows intelligible patterns and that those patterns are accessible to human awareness. Across civilizations, eras, and cultures, the same shapes emerged because they were not invented. They were observed, discovered in the movement of stars, the growth of plants, the proportions of the human body, and the rhythms of consciousness itself. The ancients did not worship geometry. They listened to it. They understood that form was the visible trace of invisible laws at work. What was lost over time was not the knowledge of these shapes, but the understanding of how to engage with them. Sacred geometry was never about collecting symbols or decoding diagrams. It was about relationship, between mind and space, between perception and structure, between the individual and the greater order they are already part of. When you approach these forms patiently, without expectation, something subtle begins to happen. You stop trying to impose meaning onto the world and instead begin to notice the meaning already there. Patterns emerge in places you once saw randomness. Balance becomes something you feel, not chase. Awareness shifts from fragmentation toward coherence. This is why sacred geometry was guarded, not because it was dangerous, but because it was transformative. It dissolves the illusion of separation. It quietly suggests that the same intelligence shaping galaxies also shapes thought, intention, and experience. And once this is seen, it cannot be unseen. It cannot. So the question is not whether sacred geometry holds power. The question is whether modern minds, conditioned for speed and distraction, are willing to slow down enough to meet it halfway. Because these shapes are still here, still precise, I'm still waiting. And the moment you stop looking at them and begin to look through them, you may realize they were never meant to explain the universe. They were meant to teach you how to recognize your place within it. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to leave your unique comment so that we can see your connection with us.